So Christmas is upon us. This is the end of the year. It is insane that I have been doing reviews for around almost 2 years now, entirely. I started around March last year, and I remember doing the top 25, but instead of top 25, I decided, because there wasn't enough I reviewed last year, there's a lot I reviewed this year, that I could make a top 50 on the best and worst albums. I always start with the worst because, you know, the best stuff to me is always so special. Whenever I have my album of the year, it's just a nice feeling, just like how a lot of people have their favourite album of the year. It just kind of lights you up with this rush of adrenaline. I have to say I did cancel the November albums of the month video. I have reviewed all the albums on it, but I'm not going to really talk about unless it's mentioned in any of these. Warning, it's not on this, but there are one or two that are on the best albums, as I did quite like them. So before we get into the top 50 worst, we're going to be going for the dishonorable mentions, and then we'll work our way from 50 to 1. So the dishonorable mentions we have is Idol's Tank, Fever 333 Darker White, Self-Deception Destroy the Art, While She Sleeps Self-Hell, Bones UK Soft, Snow Patrol The Forest is the Path, Left to Suffer Leap of Death, On Lap Waves, Kitty Fire, and Highly Suspect As Above So Below. Let's go into the top 50 weakest albums in my opinion. So number 50 we have Florence Black, Bed of Nails. In my opinion, it's got some decent ideas, especially the title track, Bed of Nails, is a very strong song I like, but a lot of it just comes off as this very cliche hard rock, bland experience that I just can't really resonate with. I found this one to have potential, but when I listened to it, I really couldn't get into it. It was just kind of a very bare bone mush of stuff in my opinion. It just feels very, very familiar in sound, and not in the way I enjoy, just kind of the more of the butt rock, hard rock direction. I'm not a fan of it. 489 Trash Boat, Heaven Can Wait. This one is not for me, in my opinion. I think Trash Boat trying to push for a more metalcore record was not on the cards for a good idea. It had potential, but I think after the first track or two, it just fell flat in its own sound. This is kind of a band I think suffered more doing that, and the pop punk direction was something that was more suited to. So I props to the band for stepping out of their comfort zone to try something different, but I don't think it really worked out as they intended. 48 we have Red-Handed Denial, A Journey Through Virtual Dystopia. This was just very forgettable. There was an interlude or instrumental track that just completely killed the run for me on this record, and the tracks didn't really save it either. I thought there was some decent ideas here and there, but with this weird sort of progressive sounds there including, I found it just to kind of feel a bit stale and underwhelming. It didn't really pull me in. 47 As I Lay Dying, Through Storms Ahead. Now, considering this has just turned into the Tim project, I will say it's just still anyway one of the weaker records. Obviously you had the band that worked on this, but then the band sort of just drops like flies, leaving Tim a solo project, which he is not giving up, and he's going to get new members. Anyway, the album as a whole, I didn't really do a proper video. I just did kind of a little piss take video. It's just not really that interesting. I think this is kind of the point of As I Lay Dying we've really heard before, and it didn't really grasp me in any way. I just found this to be kind of a lackluster experience. It's probably the weakest they've done. It just kind of feels way too similar and a weaker version of what they've had to offer in the past. 46 Art of Dying, Won't Look Back. This was just not that interesting to me. I don't really remember much of this. It's probably the most forgettable album on this list, or at least one of them. I just can't tell you anything about the tracks. I've listened to this twice and it's just completely escaped my head. It doesn't really offer much substance in a way of creativity. It just kind of feels very generic in its own sound. I just can't really get into this one. 45, Mushroom Head, Cool the Devil. Mushroom Head, A Wonderful Life, I believe of the album, the previous one, I quite enjoyed a bunch of the tracks, but this I just couldn't get into. It feels like such a step down from what the album had to offer, and it's very different from the new metal sound that the band's been going for. It's got potential, Call the Devil. I think there's some nice sounds they had, but for a consistent album, this was just one of the worst they've released, so I can't really get into this one whatsoever. 44, Kings of Leon, Can We Please Have Fun? No, we can't, because this album still has its own problems. While it might be one of the better releases from Kings of Leon in a while, with some decent genius ideas, I think it quite suffers still with a lot of it. It's one album that just does not pull me in much as it tries to. It just feels over. Just kind of feels a bit barren. Some of the elements just feel a bit overproduced from what it's going for. Some songs even have annoying moments that just don't make it quite as good, like Mustang. Good potential, but I'm just not really that big on it. 43, Razorlight, Planet Nowhere. Honestly, I feel like for Razorlight, this just goes nowhere. I even enjoy the You Are Entering the Human Heart single, which they released part of the, I think it's a live album or a compilation album, I'm not quite sure. It could be a hits album, I have no clue. But even that felt like there was a lot more creativity in it. I like the beat and I like the rhythm, but this just feels like a very slog and mess of a Razorlight album, one that I just don't think really would pull me in. It really misses the mark of what made their first few records work. Like Up All Night is just such a great record from start to finish. Every track just kicks ass, and even the self-titled album just has, well, it goes a bit for a more relaxed approach. It still feels very catchy. This one feels like it's trying to just replicate that magic and it just fails on the spot. 42, A Bro Job, Deathcore is Dead. One of the weakest deathcore albums I've heard in a while. I know it's supposed to be a piss take, but even the piss take just loses its charm here. I think the writing is far weaker than what they've done before, and frankly, there wasn't really anything that enticed me. The only thing that really pulled my interest was Slobber to Prevail being a song title, which is funny, but I just find a lot of it just to feel very damp, and the instrumentation just feels so basic in deathcore standards. It didn't really pull me into this joke or elaborate humour that the band's pulling off. It just felt pretty dull, to be honest. 41, Deathlands, Cold World. Just wasn't really a fan. I think there was some nice ideas here and there, but I just found this really suffered in its own ideology I wanted to push for. It just didn't really click with me. I found this one just to be kind of weak on the spot, but I guess that's just my opinion. I haven't really heard much else about Deathlands, so I can't really say much else, but yeah, this was not an album I quite enjoyed that much. Number 40, Young Medicine, Cold Blooded. Young Medicine has been a very small band that I've even listened to a few years back, and I did enjoy what I've heard, but to me this just feels very subpar on the kind of standard very basic structure of hard rock with electronic. And you can normally make electronic hard rock pretty fun because you got a lot more instrumentals to use. You can play with synths, you can play with keys, there's all sorts you can play around with, and I think there are a few songs that work, but for the most part this just feels like a very, very bland release. I just can't really get into this one. Number 39, Kill the Lights, Death Melodies. I appreciate that some of Bullet for My Valentine's members have formed this new band, and while I did enjoy the first album enough, I think this is just unfortunately kind of weak. There isn't really a strong song per se, and there are some like catchy elements, some decent riffs here and there, but vocally it just kind of misses the mark sometimes, and in a melodic sense of what they're trying to go for sometimes. Not really my cup of tea. It's kind of very disappointing in what it's trying to be. Number 38, we have Nothing More, Carnal. I've just found Nothing More just to kind of be really clenching on straws with this more basic tune they've been going for with the new stuff. And it's nice that the band's been getting a lot of recognition. Like, if it doesn't hurt, an Angel Song have been number one US mainstream rock songs for 2 weeks in a row, when they both charted, and that's cool. It's nice to see Nothing More get more exposure from this, but it just kind of feels very basic, like Kerrang or Octane Core, and it definitely doesn't have any of the strengths that the older stuff have, because I definitely enjoy some of the earlier Nothing More records, but yeah, I can't really say I enjoyed this one. This one was just not a fun album. 37, we have New Model Army, Unbroken. This one definitely was a very mixed bag. Like, it probably should be higher on this list, but I think the dull songs just really bored me, and then the good songs just weren't really strong enough to lift the record up. It definitely had some elements I enjoyed, but for a whole album, it was such a slog and such a snooze fest that it didn't even matter how good the songs were. It wouldn't not change my opinion on the record. It was so unfortunate that it had to be this way, but yeah, that's New Model Army. I'm really unfortunate because I was kind of looking forward to that as well. 36, Evil Dead, Toxic Grace. This one is just a very, very dumb album. I think the way that they just put in the goofiest lyrics, just the way that they try and get this point across throughout the record, it just does not work. Evil Dead, even here, the instrumentals just don't really feel like top-notch Evil Dead, and Toxic Grace, just in my opinion, is just such a I don't want to say pathetic, but it just feels like lyrically this one really just blows in any way that it's trying to kind of explain itself or just kind of show you. It's just not a fun album, one that I did not enjoy, and a lot of my brain has thankfully forgotten it, so yeah, I did not enjoy this one at all. 35, South of Salem, Death of the Party. Yeah, this one's just not it. I think the South of Salem just doesn't really have the strongest lineup. I think the vocalist isn't really that impressive to me. He's got some good moments, but I think there's a lot of pushing to try too hard in there, and instrumentally and just with this more like kind of the frames, it does not really build up to a catchy or complete song. I think I enjoyed the first track a bit, but then afterwards it just dives into a very mediocre record that I just had to put it here because I wasn't a fan. 34, Wage War, Stigma. As I enjoyed Tombstone a lot, it was one of my favourite tracks of the week. It was literally my track of the week when I started doing the series. It was just a lot of fun, and I think it definitely puts in a lot of classic elements and new elements, but Wage War is one of those bands where I think they have some good songs, but they just can't make a very consistent record like they used to. Manic to me was fine, but I just found this one to not be that good of a listen. Stigma, on the other hand, is by far, by the numbers, one of the most octane core, easily just trying too hard records. This blows completely. I think other than this, maybe track like Magnetic and Nails, the other singles were okay. I just found everything else to be just so bland and just dull in every way it could be. I've said I got a Tilly jump scare because I'm talking about a band that she clearly liked. Can you stop clawing my chair, please? Wage War is just not it for me. This definitely is one of my least favourite metalcore albums this year, and definitely the band's weakest. Are you done? I know I talked about Wage War. Evidently that definitely crossed a nerve there, but I did not enjoy that. Anyway, yeah, please don't. That's my mouse. Leave it alone. Number 33, Bon Jovi, Forever. In my opinion, this is just a very bland hair metal act, and Bon Jovi definitely were at the time one of the best, one of the biggest artists going, with like Living on a Prayer, You Give Love a Bad Name. There was so much. To me, modern Bon Jovi is just one of the reasons why hair metal just doesn't really exist now. It just struggles. It feels like a product of its time, but bringing in a modern case of the sense, it just doesn't feel like a natural progression in sound. This to me just kind of feels like a very weak slog of an album that just didn't really need it, to be honest. It's just kind of unfortunate, but yeah, Bon Jovi, we're entering weak Bon Jovi albums with this. Number 32, Sheer Mag, Playing Favourites. This was just an obnoxious record. The most interesting thing about this band is how the name is supposed to be Mere Shag. I've mentioned this on the review, but I could not get into this record. I just found it so annoying, to be honest, and that's why it's in 32. 31, Kids in Glass Houses, Pink Flamingo. It's cool to see Kids in Glass Houses come back, but frankly, this just is not the album I really hoped for. I don't mind when soft pop punk bands come and do a record, because frankly, stuff like from McFly and Busted, they do have some very catchy hits, and they definitely do have some decent records. But to me, Kids in Glass Houses in that lineup just doesn't really impress me. It just kind of feels like an album that just feels easily disposable of, just a release. It's unfortunate, because I think Kids in Glass Houses definitely have some very clear potential, because they're all talented. I just don't think it's music that's suited for me, to be honest. Number 30, Jesus and Mary Chain, Glasgow Eyes. Just a very disappointing record. It just feels like a lot of it is just demo tracks just put onto a record, and clearly the demo tracks, because they shouldn't really be on there. A lot of it just feels unfinished, just feels like there's a lot missing to it. It just feels kind of like it's a lackluster record that needed a lot more going into it. Number 29, Powerman 5000, Abandoned Ship. Powerman 5000 have kind of been this one of the slightly more obscure new metal, industrial metal bands that not a lot of people talk about, because I don't think there is much to talk about. The track When Worlds Collide is the only one I really remember from their earlier stuff, even though I have listened to them on repeat. They aren't really my cup of tea, and Abandoned Ship does not push for any of their best ideas, I can tell you that. 28, Coldplay, Moon Music. Coldplay have just been a very, very bland band, in my opinion. Just a band that I think it doesn't matter what they do, they'll just always get a lot of popularity for it, because Music of the Spheres is arguably one of the weakest records I think they've ever put out, and while Moon Music definitely has much better tracks, especially some of the ones that play more with the strings. It's a nice touch. In general, it just can't stray away from Coldplay's very generic poppy sound that has often plagued a lot of their music. Yeah, I honestly think there's definitely some good ideas. The New Music is definitely not the weakest album from them, but I wouldn't say it's a strong album at all. Number 27, we have James Yummy. Are you back again? Can you stop clawing my chair, please? My chair is just completely ruined to this cat. Anyway, I guess she doesn't like me talking about James or Coldplay. Yeah, James is just not a very... Can you not attack my Xbox either, please? James is not a very concrete band nowadays, and I think this is an example why. It's definitely a case of the bands had some really good songs back in their day. Like, there's a lot of iconic songs to me that they've done that stand out and they're good, but here, I don't know, it doesn't even feel like the same band nowadays. It just feels like a very weak attempt at trying to push for a more pop, very pop heavy album, and the writing to me just hasn't really even been that interesting either. Yeah, I gotta be honest, James definitely were product of their time, but now they kind of lost in my opinion. And it is weird that ended up being one of my biggest reviews, because I don't think a lot of people agreed with that. But yeah, in my opinion, James just definitely not it. Number 26, the Zootons, the Big Decider. Can you please stop being weird? Apologies for my cat, she's very hyperactive this morning. The Zootons just, I don't think they necessarily have the creativity as when they created Valerie, because a lot of this just feels very basic. It's a heavily Nile Rodgers produced record, and you can clearly tell why, because with Nile Rodgers, he can have a good hand in making some good pop, but most of the time it just suffers in the same territory as a lot of other acts, and Zootons here just loses what made them work in the first place. It definitely is an identity loss, mainly working with Nile Rodgers if you're a rock band, so it's definitely unfortunate to see that. Number 25, we're entering the halfway point now, and we got The Last Dinner Party, Prelude to Ecstasy. To me, I just found this to be a very weak approach on taking indie and an ABBA style and putting it together. I know a lot of people like this record, and that's fair. There's been a lot of positivity about it, but it's just not a fun album. Just one that I just can't even get into. I find this one just not really resonate. Lyrically, I just can't even get into it. Instrumentally, I just think it really feels kind of too similar to ABBA at times, so I just can't really enjoy it. It's just a unfortunately unpleasant record for me. 24, we have Pylon Reenactment Society, Magnet Factory. One of the smallest albums I've reviewed. I don't think anyone even knows about Pylon Reenactment Society, because there was the band Pylon, but obviously that's not going anymore. It's Pylon Reenactment Society, and I just don't think this is really a strong record. This is just very by the numbers, the similar stuff that they've done before. It's not really for me. 23, The Vaccines, Pickup Full of Pink Carnations. I've always had a problem trying to pronounce that on the spot, but yeah, this was weak. The Vaccines have had some good stuff, but around this point, this is just some of the more basic indie rock stuff that doesn't really go anywhere. This is definitely the band's weakest material, I can say by far. It just does not entice or pull anything original to it. It's just kind of going by the numbers of what they've done before, but in a weaker way, I guess. 22, Emil Ball's Love Fix It. I'm used to this band doing a lot of covers, but for a metalcore band, they just kind of don't really do it for me. There's some okay songs towards the start, and there's one or two decent songs towards the end. Most of it is just made up with very weak songs where the production feels off. There's some weird mixing choices, in my opinion at least, and the vocals just aren't really doing it for me. It's just a kind of it fails in comparison to a lot of the better metalcore this year, unfortunately. Number 21, Palais Royale, Death or Glory. I found this one to be lyrically one of the weakest records I've listened to, and song structure wise, it definitely feels like the band's abandoned what made them work to go for a very toned down, basic rock record. Yeah, this just was an awful attempt at that. Number 20, Gossip, Real Power. It's Gossip's big comeback, and frankly, it just doesn't work. I did not enjoy this one. Number 19, Pixies, The Night the Zombies Came. The lowest 2 out of 5 I've given. It should be lower, to be honest, because Pixies' comeback is one of the most disappointing things about 2024. This was horrendous. There was so much of their iconic sound just gone. It wasn't even Pixies at this point. You could have just labelled it anything else, and you wouldn't know, because it just completely lost the soul of Pixies, in my opinion. This definitely is a very big butch or bludgeon in their big iconic discography. It's awful. Number 18, 4-Stroke Baron, Data Diamond. I guess it's just an album I don't quite understand, but a lot of it just feels like weird noises that don't really make for good instrumentals, in my opinion. There's not really one song that just feels like a concrete listen. And the biggest thing I was looking forward to is Adam Yancey from Vola appears as a feature on the final track, and unfortunately I just still couldn't get into it, even with his good drumming, which I don't think they very utilised much, because I can always recognise his drumming. I can't there. It just feels like it just overlaps with the rest of the sound. I guess it's because it's a very clunky record that it just struggles to have any moments that stand out, but I just remember a lot of it just not working, and it is unfortunate because Four Stroke Baron, pretty good live, and they've had some pretty good songs. Number 17, Alien Ant Farm, Mantras. I thought this was a very basic attempt at trying to push back on an older sound, and while it is unfortunate, Alien Ant Farm lead singer got punched by CKY frontman. Yeah, they're on the same. It looks like they might be on the same stage for download unless they realise this and change it. I thought that was funny to bring up, but Mantras, not it, unfortunately. Anthology definitely has a much stronger standard on their writing, and here now it definitely fails to bring in all the creativity that they brought to the table in the first place. Even though I wouldn't say Alien Ant Farm are one of the most creative artists by far, there's just a lot more new metal artists that made it work. Mantras is definitely lacking in creativity. Number 16, Skillet Revolution. A top 50 list or a worst album list without Skillet is surprising if they've released an album, and that's why they're here. Skillet is just continuing on this downward spiral into the weakest sounds they can create. Luckily, it's not as bad as Legendary or Dominion, but it's not much better, and it's still weaker than Unleashed, an album that I don't like at all. So we're already going 4 for 4 in Skillet's worst albums, and I guess there is some potential here and there, but Skillet's sound is completely lost at this point. The breakdowns here feel so constricted on the mainstream sound that they just don't even feel like they should be there at all. I find this just very weak. Number 15, Eels Time. Interesting title for a band like this. I can get into it. I think modern Eels really suffers in the sound of trying to bring what the older stuff did, and I just don't think it works as well. I've never been the biggest fan of Eels in general, but this is just not it. This is definitely not a good Eels album in my opinion. Number 14, Imagine Dragons, Loom. I can guess it's not the worst thing they've put out, because Origins exists, and Act 2 Mercury was also very weak, but Loom isn't much better. I think Loom is one of the more by the numbers safest records they've put out next to Origins, and I guess Evolve to an extent. I think it's more safe in that it just sticks to a very similar structure of sound throughout. It's definitely not pushing for a bloated track list like a lot of the other albums have, but it doesn't really feel like it should have many of the tracks it does. Not really a standout track, and the Fred Durst sort of vocal delivery in Eyes Closed is just awful. This is not a good album in my opinion. I did not enjoy this one. Number 13, Kasabian Happenings. Kasabian were definitely one of the big, fun, iconic bands in this sort of Britpop indie wave. Now struggle, in my opinion. I think The Alchemist Euphoria is a decent album, but this is the first time I found Kasabian to really struggle in captivating a different sound. They try and push for a more electronic pop radio friendly approach, which they don't need to because they've done stuff like this before, but this is not it. I think there's just so many weak moments, a lot of annoying vocal performances as well, like the track Cool, for example. I did not enjoy that, and I think the vocals really rubbing the wrong way here and there. Not a fun song, or album for that matter. Number 12, Ministry, Hopium for the Masses. This one very much just pushes out any sort of creativity to push for political agenda, and it's all in your face with what it's going for. Now, obviously I'm not American, so I don't really necessarily have as much of a problem with what happens in America, but I could still sort of make my own opinion on it. But for fuck's sake, it really annoys me where it's right in your face with this is what we think, and it annoys us that others don't think this way, because the US has definitely been divisive with especially more recent presidencies, like how there's been so many people hating on Trump, and there's so many people hating on Kamala Harris, that it just created this huge division for like people. Like, you could say psycho and someone will say fuck you're a disgusting person for voting this, and it definitely speaks a lot about our society as a whole, unfortunately. And yes, I had to bring the society quote, but it's unfortunate because artists might have some good artists definitely in their opinion have some good views, but it's going to get brought down. Even one of my favourite bands, Starset, talks a lot about it brings more politics into it, not a viewpoint but more of like a sort of general consensus perspective of it, and some people just misinterpret it as politics. But Ministry here, very in your face about it, and lyrically it's so weak and very sad to see what it is. I did not enjoy this one. 11, we have Any Given Day, Limitless. Five Finger Death Punch haven't done an album this year, so luckily this band has kind of taken the torch and just did a very knockoff Five Finger Death Punch record. That's literally all I have to say. I did not care for it. Number 10, Linkin Park, From Zero. I am not a fan of modern Linkin Park. I have seen a lot of people enjoy it because you still got some of the elements that made Linkin Park feel that way, but to me this is easily the weakest thing they put out. Even One More Light had more passion, and just, I guess it just felt more genuine. This doesn't so much for me. It's weird that they're trying to blend all sort of albums into this one, and you just get a very messy record because of it. If they just stuck with a structure like Two-Face, it might be better, but having a lot of songs like The Emptiness Machine or Overflow, Stained as well, it just has so many different ideas that it doesn't come off as a nice listen from start to finish. Very wonky track list, and I'm not a fan of Emily Armstrong as a singer, so yeah, not a fan of Linkin Park with this one. Number 9, we have the Snuts, Millennials. This is by far the weakest thing they've put out. I've enjoyed their more sort of like punk rocky sound, or at least a bit more of a just a little bit more of the livelier sound. Did not care for this one though. I felt this one just rubbed me in the wrong way. It just felt so much like it was trying to present itself as this goofy, soft, sunshiny, upbeat album that just doesn't really work in the sense. It just feels so over the top in this sound, and I just couldn't get into it. I did not enjoy this one. Number 8, Vertilizer, Leave It All Behind. If you haven't heard of Pylon Reenactment Society, I very much would say this is even less popular. This was awful in my opinion. I think lyrically it's just the most basic sound, basic writing with the most basic sound. It feels like it has nothing that hasn't been done before. It feels like a carbon copy of sort of like what Disturbed and Skillet and bands like that would write nowadays, but in the most generic hard rock sound possible. It was just so bland to sit through. At number 7, The Voids, Like All Before You. A very messy stylistic choice for this record. Just every track feels so different, and I remember that my short on this did blow up quite a bit, the biggest and most amount of attention I've had on a video. Yeah, I can see not a lot of people would agree with that, but I think this is a very weak record, and if Julian Casablancas is kind of putting the strokes behind for The Voids here, I hope The Voids can definitely do a much stronger album next time, because I did not like this. Number 6, Glass Animals, I Love You So Fucking Much. Very basic, very sluggish. It is just awful how Glass Animals had one of the biggest songs of all time, which was fine, but they've even had better stuff before then, and now we have got one of the most bare bone, one of the most lackluster records there. It feels like they're just pushing so far into this very bland, awful direction, and I just don't have any interest in really checking them out. If this is what they're doing again and again, I'm just giving up with it. Glass Animals here just disappoint immensely with this one. And then we enter the top 5 worst records now. Number 5, we have Bleachers, self-titled. So bad. It is just so bad. I really found this one to be just absolutely grating to listen to. There is nothing that really pulled me in. It's just so boring of a listen. So much of a chore as well. There's a lot of tracks and it just doesn't go anywhere with them. Just terrible. Number 4, Dead by April, The Affliction. The guest features did not help. I don't care that they had Smashed Into Pieces. This was awful. Just in general, one of the weakest metalcore albums I've listened to. It plays more electronical, as there's a lot of electronics, but the electronics is so aggravatingly annoying that they just ruin any chance of the song working. There is not a song I enjoy on this record. It is just, by the numbers, so weak. It is awful to listen to. I did not like Dead by April here. Number 3, Kaiser Chiefs. Kaiser Chiefs' Easy 8th album. Really, this is Kaiser Chiefs now. I think the first few albums definitely have a lot of their tongue-in-cheek, definitely a lot of their very well-grounded stuff. Employment is a fantastic record, and I think for Britpop, that is one of the best releases we've had. This isn't even Britpop, this is just downright pop dance that just feels so soulless. It feels like Kaiser Chiefs have just sold their soul for this. And calling it Easy 8th album is definitely just describing that it's just an easy album. If this is the new Kaiser Chiefs, completely, this is just the casket of it. It is awful. Number 2, we have Trapped, the full. Yes, Trapped. If you remember that name, Trapped, Chris Taylor Brown, the lead singer, has just been one of the worst vocalists, frontman you could probably meet. He is a complete arsehole. He's had the Trapped Twitter banned, and I forgot this even came out. Shadow Work, the only reason I knew that album was coming out was because he was promoting it through pissing off fans, attacking bands, and now he can't do that because Trapped's social media was banned because he supported statutory rape. What an intelligent individual. Fucking hell. Anyway, sound. This is just by the numbers, just as bad, if not worse, than Shadow Work. The writing does not pick up, it does not go anywhere else, it stays exactly where it has been for the last 20 years. It's Trapped just doing what they always do best. Headstrong and take on anyone. Now, the number 1 worst album, in my opinion, that it just tops the others just because of how it is. But I will say, compared to some of the other stuff on this list, it is at least funny when it comes to its music videos. So I will give it some props that it has got entertainment value, but not in the good way. This is Falling in Reverse, Popular Monster. My least favourite album of the year and one of my least favourite albums of all time. It's just a compilation of big singles shoved onto an album with 4 new songs. Only 4. And it just completely shows why Ronnie Radke is one of the worst musicians of all time. I don't think his rapping's very good. His vocals are fine, but the fact that the lyrics is just about cancel culture and how he's trying to better himself by continuing to be this scumbag that he's always been. It's all a facade, and I can't believe people support this, and I can't believe this is a very successful album as well. Like, it's already certified, it's got a bunch of hits on it. I can't believe that people would even give this the time of day. It's awful. You can tell straight away putting your mugshot on the album art was a terrible idea. Like, this is the album that everyone I know just jokes about because it's horrendous. It's literally that. I did a 10-minute video talking about why this album's garbage. I use an American term. Probably prefer to say rubbish, but I mean Falling Reverse is American, so it's a garbage record. Popular Monster is probably the best song on there, and that's why they named it that, because it felt like they had a big hit with that, and it was definitely a big song for them that worked in some way, but it's still not good. And then he just proceeded, oh yeah, let's just ride that, because it's our biggest song, let's just name the album that, so people would know it. And then you get some awful songs like Bad Guy, that's just awful. Can't forget the Last Resort fucking rendition that was horrendous. There's nothing to like on this, and I think Falling Reverse have just managed to make metalcore shit. If this is like one of the biggest albums that plays into that genre, then metalcore is just on a slope to decline. There's definitely some good metalcore this year, but this is just horrendous. And why would you want this to be the face of it, or one of the biggest metal-esque bands? It's a band that played with pop-punk, a band that played with post-hardcore, that pushed into this territory. Please just stay in the other one, because this is bad. And Ronnie Radke is just an insufferable human being. That is my top 50 worst albums. Sorry if a lot of it did get a bit repetitive. I think because there's more albums, the reasons I don't like them kind of feel a bit similar, but I still dislike the albums that I put in the top 50, and some of the old dishonorable mentions aren't too bad. And I guess I could say the same about some of the low on the list stuff, like Florence Black definitely has moments, but yeah, this record, or no, this list definitely was something that we've built up for a while, and yeah, you might disagree with some of it, and that's fair, but there has been a bunch of weak stuff that's come out this year, and I mean a lot of weak stuff that's come out this year, that's why it's a top 50, but there will be a top 50 best albums, which I always enjoy, because it's not looking at the worst of what there has to offer, it's looking at the best, and frankly there's been so many good albums this year that I'm happy to talk about. So that is my list. Hope you'll enjoy. Thank you so much for watching, and if you watched the end of this long video, very much appreciate that. I've got a best video coming out, and there'll be the podcast, and I'll get the track of the week stuff out of the way, and that's it. So thank you so much for watching, and yeah, see you in the next video.